Welcome back to Ty and the Guy. My name is Wes Chatham. And this is my co-Ty Franck.
Welcome back, Ty and the Guy. What are we talking about today, Ty?
So the most famous case of IP plagiarization ever. We're talking about Nosferatu.
Nosferatu.
which the original Nosferatu, the 1920s Nosferatu, was straight up a plagiarized ripoff of Dracula by Bram Stoker, where they changed all the names to try to avoid the plagiarization claim. They still got sued by Stoker's wife. They were ordered to destroy every print of the film. They didn't. And so some of the prints got out, and that's why we still have the 1920s Nosferatu to this day, is because they didn't follow the court order to destroy all the films. But it is straight up a ripoff of Bram Stoker's Dracula. But we should talk about why it's interesting in its own right, because if you look at it on the surface, Nosferatu is just Bram Stoker's Dracula. All the plot beats are exactly the same, right? There's the guy who's the real estate guy who goes off to the Count's castle to help him buy a piece of property back in his country. Count's moving to that country. The Count falls for the real estate guy's wife. The horror ensues. All of that. Beat for beat, it's almost exactly the same. But there is one thing Nosferatu does that Dracula does not, that makes it interesting, and I think is the reason why it's still compelling to this day, and the reason why we have revisited it with the new movie Nosferatu, which just came out last year, or that was last year, right? Came out last year?
Was it last year? Yeah,
it was 2024. Yeah.
Jesus, we are so can we ever get our shit together and do a movie when it's like when it's fresh out? No. We're gonna talk about this movie, and the thing is, it's like our timing is this is why our timing's so shitty. So when the brand new movie comes out, you're either the first one in, we talk about where everybody's interested in talk about it, or you wait like we usually do till the movie's 20 years old and
we're talking about 80s movies.
Yeah, and so it's nostalgic and people are there. But what you don't do is wait till everything that could be said is said about the movie, and then you come in right after all of it and just say the same shit that everybody's already said about it.
Yes. So please remember to not like, not subscribe, not comment.
Thank you. My favorite. My history with Nosferatu is when I was in college. There was an elective for a film history class. And I took this class and I loved it so much that I took it 3 semesters in a row. And you only get credit the first time. And then if you take it again, you're not getting credit for it the second time. But I just really liked the professor. I really enjoyed the class. But I ended up, him and I would have long conversations after class and we would talk about this. And when I got the show Barbershop, I came back to finish my semester. So then we got, he was really fascinated with like being on set. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But in this class, we did the history of Nosferatu, and he showed the movie, the 1922 now version, and he gave us context and history. And there was a lot of anti-Semitism in this movie at the time. I don't remember. It hasn't came up since this came out now, but I remember at the time, this is 1922 Germany. Obviously
it was German film.
Yep. Yeah, German film. So there was also a lot of that stuff coming up. But he played this movie, and I remember being shocked. And one thing I don't remember, because I remember we watched Metropolis, and we watched it with a score by Queen. So we watched some of these movies with modern scores, and that was amazing, by the way. So I think I watched this with a modern score. But what struck me is how fucking scary it was. Yeah. We watched a bunch of movies, watched a bunch of horror movies, and anything in the 20s or anything silent, whatever, it immediately takes you out. You have a level of separation that's not scary. This was fucking scary. And Orlok was scary. And the visuals and him turning and everything.
Partially due to the amazing performance by Max Schreck, who is Orlok. He's creepy looking, he's scary, he moves weird. He's a scary dude. If
Yeah,
you ran into that dude in the alley, you would think you were going to die.
And apparently he was kind of weird in real life.
He was
He never married, never had a family. Not saying that that's weird, but like, you know, there was, if somebody thinks that you're a vampire, I guess it is kind of weird.
Well, I mean, I think he was the original method actor, and he was like, I'm playing a vampire, so I will become a vampire for the rest of my life.
Right. And that spawned that movie with William Dafoe plays Orlok.
Yep.
What was the name of that movie? It was so funny. I think he won an Oscar for that.
Yep.
Shadow of the Vampire.
Shadow of the Vampire.
Yep.
Shadow of the Vampire. Because the rumor is that he was an actual vampire because he was so weird in real life, but only he could have played that character so well. And we watched a lot of silent movies in class, and this one it definitely stands above all the ones that we watched.
And it works. Like most silent movies, as you said, don't work anymore, right? You watch them and they throw you out. They feel weird.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the ones that still works. You watch it today, it's still effective. It's still, like you said, it's still scary. It still has, it doesn't have this sort of silliness that all silent movies seem to have now. They just kind of feel silly.
Mm-hmm.
It never feels silly. But the thing that I find most interesting about the Nosferatu version of the vampire legend, because what I said at the beginning is true. Nosferatu is a straight up IP theft of Dracula. They didn't want to pay for the rights to make a Dracula movie, so they just made up their own version of Dracula, which was exactly fucking the same, except they just changed the names and lost a lawsuit about it. But the thing that's different, the thing that makes it still interesting today, and I'm sure this is why Eggers wanted to make this movie, because it is the thing that's still interesting, is Dracula is sexy. Dracula is seductive. In Stoker's Dracula, Mina Harker is seduced by Dracula. He actually seduces her and brings her over to join with him through the power of his seductive nature. The thing that they do with Nosferatu with Orlok is they get rid of all of that. He is just straight up a monster. He's grotesque. He's rotting. He's a living plague. He never seduces anybody. He just terrifies them. He's terrifying. I mean, the husband Harker who goes out to sell the property. If you watch especially the recent one with
Keanu Reeves.
Oh,
Keanu Reeves. Yeah, the recent one with Keanu Reeves. Well, not recent, but like 20 years ago.
The Coppola one.
Yeah, the Coppola one. Dracula seduces him with the power of his personality and his magnetism and all of that stuff. And then when he goes to London and he seduces Mina, and he's played by a young wow, I'm forgetting everybody's. Yeah, thank you. If I can forget everybody's name, played by young Gary Oldman. He's incredibly seductive and all of that, and he uses the power of his magnetism, his personality, and his seductiveness to bring people to his side. Orlok has none of that.
Mm-mm.
Orlok is just a scary fucking monster.
Yeah.
And he gets Harker to do what he wants by just scaring the shit out of him, by making him think he's going to die. And when he goes over to, in the original, I forget which city, because it's not London. Because the Bram Stoker version, he goes to London. I forget which the city is that Orlok goes to and buys a villa. Is it in Italy or something like that?
Wait,
I forget.
You talking about it's in Romania in the movie?
No, but where he buys the property, not where he originally comes from.
It's not in London.
No, not in.
Is it in Germany?
I think it's in German town of Wisburg.
Okay, yeah, it's in Germany. Yeah, because the thing that they did.
Hey,
with
we told you
Nosferatu,
not to like and subscribe, guys.
Yeah, please don't like and subscribe. But the thing they did with Nosferatu is they wanted to create a very German version of the story.
Yeah.
And so everything is set in in places that Germans would know and Germans would have some connection to. So he doesn't buy a house in London; he buys a house in a German place.
Mm-hmm.
But he doesn't do it by again. I'm going to keep using the word seducing because that is the only correct word. He doesn't seduce these people to work for him. He just terrifies the shit out of them. And then when he gets there, he they when the boat arrives and the rats come off and they're like, oh, it's a plague ship, the plague rats. He is a living plague. Everywhere he goes, he just brings a miasma of death with him.
Mhm.
That is what makes Nosferatu interesting to me. That it gets rid of all of the seductiveness of the vampire story and replaces it with this repugnance and death and rot and grotesqueness. Even though the stories are functionally exactly the same, beat by beat, they are exactly the same. They tell very different stories just because of that.
Yeah, I agree. I think the vampire that I grew up with when I first started watching vampire movies, like the Vampires of the Lost Boys or Vampires of Near Dark, which in some ways were kind of wish fulfillment movies.
Yeah,
where the vampires were just kind of like, in the Lost Boys, they're like handsome dudes with superpowers.
They're cool teenagers.
Yeah, cool teenagers. I mean, even Near Dark, like the one thing that is a wish fulfillment movie. I mean, they talk about, you watch the movie and they talk about how bad it sucks, traveling and you're staying the same age. But when they kill those people in the bar and when they like the scene, you're like, I want to be one of those. When you're a kid, you're like, I want to hang out with Keith Sutherland, Jason Patrick. I want to be a part of the Lost Boys thing. And so the sexy vampire, it wasn't until I read Salem's Lot early on, that was the first monster type Orlok vampire that I came across. And that was scary. And that scares the shit out of me. Sexy vampire serves its purposes. Like, I love those vampire movies like The Lost Boys. I like that moment in the vampire movies where, like, okay, here's how our vampire works.
Right.
They can't see the reflection. They can't do the rules of the vampire. And then even Fright Night. Like, Fright Night was a really fun, sexy vampire. He charmed all the moms, in the neighborhood and all that situation. So, so when I saw this in the film class, and I saw this version of vampire, we ended up going through like the history of the vampire and reading the novel and all the things. But I remember thinking, I think in terms of horror, I like the Orlok version. It's scarier to me. And the thing that's scary is, yes, he's a monster. And I think that Robert Eggers in his film, like what he does very well is like you see the echo of what the human that it used to be.
Yeah.
You see, like it has and I'm a mustache, I love me a mustache, but it had like this like Romanian nobleman mustache.
Yeah, he looks like an old cavalry officer.
Yeah,
right?
Like an old cavalry, and you see that there was still the shape of a human that exists within him, but what he is now is so old and evil that it is beyond humanity. And that he only mimics human behavior to get what he wants in the situations that he wants. And what I find really scary about Orlok and vampires in general, so sneaky shit scares me. Right. So they're all vulnerable, particularly like I think in the novel the sun didn't bother Dracula, right? That it wasn't until in the novel it does?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
Are you sure?
I think the movie.
Oh, no. What it is he's weaker in the day.
Okay.
His powers are less in the day, but it still bothers him. But it doesn't cause him to burst into flames.
Anyway, so I think in the movie was the first time that the sun will kill him, which I think the vulnerabilities are what make the vampire interesting. But since the vampire is vulnerable, they have to be sneaky. Right. They lie, they connive, and they control minds. But it's almost like the Jedi mind trick, where it's like it doesn't fully work on everybody, but somebody like Lily Rose Depp character who is constantly has one foot in the psychic realm and one foot in the reality. He really has a deep effect on her, and being able to read what her needs or her longing is, and like uses his evil powers to fulfill those things to seduce her. And that shit is really scary to me.
I would call it less seduction, and I would call it more sort of a mental domination. Because the thing that Orlok does, especially in the Eggers movie, is he dominates. Right when Harker is not Harker, I forget what the character's name is in Nosferatu. But it's the Harker character. He's terrified. Because Orlok just dominates him. like physically intimidates him, physically threatens him. And I feel like what happens to the Lily Rose Depp character is he doesn't physically dominate her, but he mentally dominates her, right? You know, you're talking about how he enforces his will upon her. Right. And it feels less like a seduction to me. And it just feels like he's ruling her. Yeah.
I guess we should probably have the setup portion of where you kind of set up the movie for us.
Everybody has seen Nosferatu, right? The 1920s Nosferatu.
We set up the history of the movie and the vampire, but just set up the quick premise of the movie.
Well, it is if you've seen any of the movies or books based on Bram Stoker's version of Dracula, you know the story. It is the story. There's a nobleman who is mysterious, who lives out in this weird part of the world that people rarely go to, who is interested in buying a villa in a modern city. And a law firm that deals with real estate transactions sends one of their junior associates out to do the paperwork, to finish the paperwork for this rich count to buy this property. While he's there, all kind of crazy shit happens. The rich nobleman is in actuality the undead. He is in Bram Stoker's version, he's Dracula. In this version, he's Count Orlok. They changed the name, but he is feared by the locals. He's very rich. He's very powerful, but he's seen as a monster, even by the locals. He buys this property. He moves into this town, and this is where the young associate's wife lives. And Orlok begins trying to consume her, to control her, to consume her. He lives on the lifeblood of others because he's a vampire. And in the Nosferatu version, he brings a plague with him. So now a plague has stricken the city while he's there. It culminates in a battle between good and evil. The people who are trying to defeat this evil thing, which in this movie is played by Willem Dafoe, who's sort of the what's that character's
Van Helsing
name? The Van Helsing character. Yeah, so he's sort of the Van Helsing character where he understands the rules that the vampire operates by and is trying to help people defeat Orlok. And so we wind up with this sort of battle against evil at the end it's to save Mina in Bram Stoker's in this. I forget what her character's name, the Lily Rose Depp character's name is, but to save her soul.
It is Ellen Hutter, and Nicholas Hoult
that's right.
is Thomas Hutter.
That's right. Yeah, so to save Ellen's soul from Orlok, they kind of come together to battle him.
So I'm gonna talk about Robert Eggers for a second. I would say that I am all in on Robert Eggers.
I think he's really interesting.
I think he is I love The Witch. The only reason that I won't say I'm all in on it is for some reason, and I don't know why, I still have not seen The Lighthouse or The North.
I did not enjoy The Lighthouse.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I think it's beautifully shot. Mm-hmm. It's beautifully shot in that really interesting black and white. I think Willem Dafoe and Pattinson, but I didn't love the movie. I thought it was kind of. At about halfway into it, I was tired of it. I was done with it. I'm like, please be about something now, and it never quite is. So that one didn't work for me. That one is all mood and no story for me. And mood will take me a long way, but mood won't take me to the finish line. I need a fucking story. But I love The Witch. I think as a filmmaker,
did you see The Norseman?
I did. I really like The Norseman. That's. Like The Witch is 1 for me. Norseman is 1A for me. Mm-hmm. Like that's almost as good as The Witch, not quite, but great. I think it's great.
Mm-hmm.
And Nosferatu. So the problem with this version of Nosferatu for me, and I'm just going to be honest with it, he's doing a very faithful version of the 1920s Nosferatu. Very faithful, right? I'm not going to say shot for shot. It's not shot for shot. That's bullshit. But it's very faithful. And if you've seen any of the Bram Stoker versions, which, like Bela Lugosi or the one with the recent one with Keanu Reeves, 20 years ago, the story. And so when you're watching this, like, everything that's going to happen before it happens. And he doesn't change the story enough to ever surprise me.
Right.
So that's my problem with it. Yeah. It's not surprising at all. Right. But what I will say is it's fucking gorgeous.
It is.
And he has got a visual style to his filmmaking that I am a huge fan of. And what I really respect is he goes all in on the Orlok version of the vampire and not the Dracula version of the vampire. He goes all in on Orlok. The character of Orlok in this movie is repugnant. Yeah. He's when you see him naked a couple times and he is rotting. He's got huge open sores on his body. Yeah. And what I like about that is he is literally the living dead. He's dead. He's rotting. Yeah. And he has to ingest this blood and life force from living things to keep himself alive. But he is a dead thing. And I like that.
And what's terrifying and interesting about it is like his body is always in various degrees of decomposing. So you get a good thing of blood, and that'll kind of bring some life into you, but then you're dead. So it's always decomposing at that time. It's through various stages. So that he stinks, that he's foul, that he's so with Robert Eggers, the way that it's like if you go to the combine, you watch these young athletes that are coming to the combine, like, man, he's got speed, he's got power, he's got all of these attributes. And that's the thing about Robert Eggers is like he's a phenomenal talent. Everything about the film, the sound design, the wardrobe, the actors,
he started out as a production designer, so he's got a real sense, right? And he did.
What's interesting is he did Nosferatu as a play when he was in high school.
That's right. He was the stage manager for the play,
right? And it was director. And it was so good that the guy that had an actual professional theater brought him in, and they did that on stage, and that really spawned his desire to be a storyteller going forward. And then it's just fitting that Nosferatu is the thing that happens. So when I'm watching this, his attention to detail and also the great performances by Nicholas Hoult and Lily Rose Depp, who is phenomenal in this movie, and I think Aaron Taylor Johnson, and he does a great job. I'm actually a fan of him. I am
too. So I first noticed him in Kick-Ass, which is a movie I really liked. Yeah. Right? And he plays like the little nerdy, skinny dude. Yeah. And then by the time you get to Kick-Ass 2, which was not a great movie, unfortunately, but he's like bulked up. He's like gotten jacked. He's like clearly been spending some time in the gym. And after that, he's been making interesting choices. Like I think it's very difficult to transition from the nerdy teenager who was in like a nerdy teenage movie like Kick-Ass into an adult actor that's taken seriously. That's a very difficult transition to make, and not a lot of people successfully manage that. Right. I think he has. Yeah, I think he's interesting,
and I think he's also got a great sense of humor. He was hilarious in Fall Guy. Yeah, and I have high hopes for him in the future of his career. But it's just so you start watching this movie, and I'm all in by the way that it's. When Robert Eggers is doing a film, it's kind of like that Christopher Nolan thing. When something happens in that movie, like the metal stake that they put through the vampire and you think for a second, wait a minute, it's a metal stake. It's usually a wooden stake, but I'm like, if it's in a Robert Eggers movie, then that means that the folklore and the history that it was a metal stake. So we're learning something new. So I just automatically trust that everything that happens in that movie, when I see Count Orlok, I'm like, that's how they fucking looked back then. Yeah. That's how an upper class Romanian yuppie looked back then. Yep. And there's just such an intention and commitment to detail that really makes his work above all. And this movie's a work of art, of Gothic art. Every frame is interesting. Yep. And I think the only thing, as we get into this, and I'm going to say it now, the only thing is when I start watching this, I'm like, I'm in. You have me. And then there's the new sequences that is not a part. And so, I'm in this film class. I've seen the original 1922 version 3 times. We've studied it. We do all the context and everything. Then I've read the novel. Then I've seen all the other iterations. So I know the story super well. Yeah. And as it starts to play out, my expectation, hope is that I'm going to be surprised, that there's going to be something new, something different, something fresh. And what it is just that story that I've seen a lot done very, very well, which is a great experience. But why not? You have me. I am in. I'm sucked in this movie. And the whole him going to Romania and the whole folklore and the dreams that he was having and the certain, like, that was so interesting. The sequence that gets him to the castle with the ghost carriage and all of those things is just great filmmaking and storytelling, and the suspense behind it. I am all in. I am ready to go. But as it revealed itself to be the story that we all know, there's no surprises. There was nothing new. There was no,
and that is my complaint about the movie is at a certain point you realize you're singing along with the song, and you're like, I've heard this song 1,000 times. I can sing all the words. I know all the things. And when that happens, at least for me, and I'm not going to say this is universal. I'm not saying everybody's like this, but because I'm so into narrative and I think so much about storytelling and narrative, because that's literally my job. Once I realize that I know all the beats, there's a part of me that just kind of takes a step back, and I'm no longer sucked in anymore. Now I have friends, and actually, the guy who's working painting my house right now is an old friend of mine. He's into the visuals. If the visuals captivate him, he doesn't care about the story.
It sounded like you said the guy that's painting my ass right now.
Yes, painting my ass right now.
Just
he's below frame right here.
Just picture frame.
When you're sitting in your chair, you don't have somebody paint your ass?
I always have somebody paint my ass.
It's the new thing.
Amazing. Yeah. Go ahead.
But he's into the visuals. That's his thing, right? Like if he reads a comic book, he doesn't read the dialogue bubbles. He just looks at the pictures. And so for him, if the visuals are stunning and drawing him in, he kind of doesn't care about the story. So I'm saying there are lots of different ways to approach media and lots of different things that you can get out of it. And for him, the visuals are everything. For me, I got to have a story. And part of what I look for in a story is a moment of surprise, or even if it's not a plot twist, it is a way of looking at something that I haven't thought about that version before. I'm like, oh, wow, that's an interesting version of that, an interesting way of looking at that. This is so it's so faithful to the 1920s version of Count Orlok, which in itself was so faithful to the Bram Stoker version of Dracula, that we all know every line of dialogue in this. We all know every lyric that there is in this song. We all know them. And for me, about halfway in, when I realized that that's what it was, I kind of fell out of it a little bit. I mean, I was still stunned by the visuals. It's still an amazing thing to watch. And like you said, it is a gothic piece of art. But as a movie, I didn't love it as much as I had hoped I would. Just because I've seen this before. I've done this. I've heard this story before.
Yeah.
And you're not giving me a new version, even slightly new version that can really sink my teeth into.
I felt the same way because I was, if I'm watching a movie and I'm in the present moment and I'm in not knowing what's going to happen next and I'm with each, then I'm a story guy all the way. And, the thing is, I like to read stories too. So like that's more important than the visuals. And then I was so into the movie up until the point where we get to Orlok, and I thought Orlok was interesting, but then that's when I realized, like, oh, is this just going to be the story that we know? And then I was like, why? Because I'm all in. I am so captivated. I'm so all in. So why not throw me for a loop? If everybody's expecting this story to go a certain way, and we've seen plenty of remakes and plenty of, we've seen this story in different iterations of the story, why not do something different? Why not go away because you have me? I'm here. And I am present and I am here for it. So let's see something more interesting, happen. Or sorry, not more interesting. Just see something that I'm not expecting.
Yeah.
And then
give me one moment of surprise.
Yeah, one moment of surprise. Like if I didn't know the history of Nosferatu and vampires, and if I didn't see all the stuff, and then I'm watching this movie for the first time, that's a different thing. But this is a story that everybody knows. So I was thinking that something different was going to play out. I didn't know that the climax of the film was going to be the exact climax of the other film.
Yeah, and I will say we might be the wrong generation because we are a generation that has seen every version of Dracula. You know, we've seen the Bela Lugosi version. We've seen the Max Schreck version. We've seen all the versions, all the remakes and everything since then. We have seen this a million times. And when Coppola did his version, it was very pretty, but it was, you know, it's the version you expect. We've seen that a bunch of times. I think if you're of the generation where the vampires you know about are Bella and whatever the Pattinson dude from if it's Bella and Edward from Twilight and you watch this is gonna surprise the shit out of you, right?
You know, that is an excellent point, and maybe I was being myopic. I think that the reality is not everybody has taken the same film history class 3 semesters in a row, and seen that movie over and over and read the book. So, you know what? That's a great point because a lot of people are watching this movie for the first time and they're like, that was a great fucking vampire movie. Right. That was the first time I saw it. And I think you and I are coming from the place of like, it's Robert Eggers. We're all in for him as a filmmaker. He is a masterful storyteller, masterful filmmaker. All of his actors and all of his films do great performances. We're watching this. It's visually stunning. But then it gets to a point where you're like, oh, he's doing the movie that we've seen over and over and over and all that. And that's where it falls. So that's really kind of a personal thing.
Yeah. And it is, I think, I'll repeat, I think it's a little bit of a generational thing. Mm-hmm. I think old guys like us who have seen every version of Dracula, we know this song. We've heard this song a million times. I think if you're 20, 20 to 25 and you go into this thing, you're going to see a version of vampires you've never fucking seen before.
Yeah.
Right? These are not the sparkly Twilight vampires.
And I definitely think he put his stamp on Orlok. And I think his stamp is probably the scariest vampire Nosferatu.
Visually, this is an amazing film. The production design is incredible. I think the design of Orlok is, as you said, incredible. Yeah.
But even how Orlok drinks blood from the chest. And also that moment where it's just quiet and it goes in and he's sucking. Yeah, it's like,
I thought that was so good. Yeah.
So good. And the most terrifying.
It was horrifying.
It was horrifying because I see that and I'm like, I do not want that to happen to me.
No.
I do not want that fucking thing.
Not want that nasty rotting dude on top of me sucking blood out of my chest.
Right, exactly. But I think you and I had the same take on this movie. I think that Robert Eggers is a masterful filmmaker. This was a beautiful, well done, well shot film. I need to go and watch The Lighthouse and Norseman. But you will
enjoy Norseman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think he's phenomenal. And I think he's doing something. I think that his attention to detail, it's like I remember when I was watching The Witch. And I remember I don't know how I came across it, but I wasn't aware of him as a director. At that point, I think that was actually his first film, but I remember watching The Witch, and I remember when they were walking through the village and the people walking by, and I remember the Native Americans walking by, and they had like, fresh game on their shoulder that they just kicked. And then I was just like, whoa, who is this guy? Who is this director? Because I feel like somebody smuggled in a video camera to the, 19th century, late 19th century, and it just did a video. It's so visceral and raw and authentic feeling and looking, unlike anything that I've ever seen before in film.
Yeah.
And that's what I felt like the way that they spoke, the old English way of talking at that time was so, I'm a fan of that because that helps me get into that world.
I think his knowledge of and commitment to good production design is part of what makes him an interesting filmmaker. Yeah. Because I mean, that's where he started out. Obviously, he still cares about it because his movies are always beautifully designed. So he obviously still cares a lot about that, even though that's not what he does anymore. I think being a production designer on one of his movies would be both intimidating and awesome because you're going to get whatever you need to make the film look the way he wants it to look, which is very cool.
Is this the first time you saw Lily Rose Depp?
I think for any amount of time, I think I was vaguely aware of her. Mm-hmm. But yeah,
I think
the first time I've seen her do a full performance.
I think she's phenomenal. What did you think?
I think she didn't blow me away. I mean, I think she's good, but she's this is mean. I thought she was a little flat. Her performance was a little flat to me, just a little. And I think part of that is deliberate. I think she's playing a very sort of unassuming character, and I think so. I think it's deliberate, but I'm not blaming her for that. But I think the movie gave me a version of her that was a little flat, and especially when her friend, the one she goes to stay with, was so much more interesting. That like,
wow.
I was like, oh, she's interesting. She's weird and kind of funny, and like the way she interacts with her husband, the Aaron Taylor-Joy character, was weird and interesting. So the main or the Depp character just felt a little flat compared to her to me.
Wow, we completely disagree. We completely disagree on that. I thought so. One of the things that really pulled me in the beginning. This is the first time I've seen her in anything. Is
and by the way, I should state, I'm not blaming her performance. I think the character was designed that way, and I think she was doing that character. But I didn't love that version of the character.
Right. I think she's infinitely more interesting than the actual original character. That was. I think she's infinitely more an interesting written character, and also a more interesting performed character than the original 1922 version of that character, or most of the other versions I've seen in that, probably with the exception of Winona Ryder in Francis Coppola's movie.
I like Winona Ryder in Coppola's version of this. I liked her. Yeah.
But when Nicholas Hoult character was going to leave to go to work and they're newlyweds, her longing and her passion for him and wanting him to stay in that room, I believed it. And one of the things that I feel like actors struggle with is that when there's scenes that are intimate and there's passionate and longing in that thing, you see two actors. You see two actors that have kissed each other for the 20th time that day for pulling it. It's just they're doing their job, and they don't make you believe it. They don't make you feel it. Lily Rose Depp had that in the beginning, and her not wanting him to leave, and that's when I was like, whoa, she's a really interesting actress. And that and as she goes through all the variations of being, like you said, mentally dominated by the vampire, and how her physically performed that, and the different possessions that she went through, and the different sexual versions of herself that she presented to her husband, physically, the physical performance of what she was doing, I think was extremely well done, a very powerful performance, and I think it's going to knock her into the top tiers.
Oh, I agree. I think this is a star-making role for her for sure. Yeah, I don't disagree with any of that, and maybe part of my problem is I've always found, and as you said, the version in the 1920s, it was women didn't get a lot to do in 1920s film. Maybe part of it is I've never particularly liked the Mina Harker character. Mm-hmm. Which is, the original Bram Stoker version. She just always seems very passive to me. Mm-hmm. And so maybe part of what is happening with that character in this movie is my dislike of this sort of passivity of that character is coming through. So I don't blame her for that. Don't blame the performer for that.
Yeah.
That might be my own personal thing.
But I think if there is something new that Robert Eggers brings to this, is I think he centers the movie around her more than it has been in other versions, without the Winona Ryder version and the Francis Coppola one. I think he centers the movie around her, and she's the hero of the movie. She's the one, and her and William Dafoe understand early on that Orlok's obsession with her is the only leverage that they have. Right. And it's the only power they have. So she sacrifices herself to save her husband, but also, London.
Or whatever that German city is.
And so, that's a really powerful thing. And I think, what makes Orlok so terrifying is that whatever was human about him has been long ago lost, and now he's just appetite.
Yes.
But it's appetite and obsession with being extremely intelligent and powerful and sneaky and conniving. that's sneaky. That always, like in any kind of scary horror situation, if somebody is sneaky, that always gets under my skin. In life, if you're around somebody, even if they're doing things that are for your benefit, even if it's an agent or a producer, even if they're doing things that are in your favor, if it's in a sneaky way, it just it just rubs me the wrong way. It gets under my skin. And that's the thing about vampires, that I spent my whole childhood not really realizing that vampires were scary, because all the movies that I loved, like you kind of, if you walk out of a movie being like, if Kiefer Sutherland came to me and was like, hey, listen, we get to be teenagers forever, and like we live in this amusement park town, and a old up guy with sax plays every night, and like, and you can fly, and we ride our dirt bikes around town. Like I might join the club,
shit, what is her name? Jamie Gertz.
I love that we have a podcast about movies and actors, and we're always like, what was that movie?
So here's the thing, is I can remember every movie, and I can remember every line of dialogue from every movie I've ever seen, but I can't remember the name of any humans. Like human names just fly right through my head.
I think that says a lot about
your character was. I could tell you all about the character. I could tell you the lines of dialogue that character said, but who portrayed them? Fuck if I know.
That just means you don't care about humans.
I don't
at all. Yeah,
I don't.
You're more interested in things.
I'm more interested in stories. Yeah, I'm interested in narratives. Like the person who did it, who fucking cares? It's just some random guy.
But stories are characters going through changes. Is there a top 5, Joseph, or do we? Well, or are we just like, we fucked the whole top 5 segment?
We got to do top Dracula.
So this list is already invalid because it doesn't have Dracula Dead and Loving It on it.
Oh, you know what? I was debating on having that. Okay, Dead and Loving It's in there. Okay.
I have to be interested, even as I go through this. Like, I'm not that into Dracula. I'm into vampires. Dracula's never really done it for me.
Okay, we have to give a shout out to Renfield because one of Wes and I's friends is in it. Somebody we both love. She's in it. So don't put it on the top 5. That's what I'm saying. Let's give it a shout out because we do have to respect that our lovely Shori Agdashli was in it.
And it has Nicholas Hoult in it.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
He was in it. Yeah. Yeah, shout out to Sheree. I didn't see the movie though. Dude, you got, like, if you ask me about like really like my early ideas of Dracula, I would say Monster Squad or Hotel Transylvania.
I don't know if I love those. Dracula Untold is terrible.
I would not put those anywhere near the top 5. I would just say like my first introduction of like, wait, who's this guy?
I think Love It First Bite was my first introduction.
Is Transylvania, what is it, 25000 or 65000? Do you remember that one?
Oh gosh.
Oh yeah.
Ed Begley Jr. and
Ed Begley Jr. and The Fly.
Yeah. Gosh, we got Swiss cheese for brains.
Jeff Goldblum. Jeff Goldblum. And I think Gina Davis is in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Transylvania 65000. Transylvania 65000, right?
I'm just gonna say the Bela Lugosi Dracula is a classic for a reason.
Yeah.
I mean, that definitely has to be in the top 5.
Yeah. I would put Coppola's Dracula.
Yeah, and I would put Coppola's Dracula, Bram Stoker's Dracula there. Mostly because I think its version of Mina Harker is very interesting. And I really like what's his face as Dracula?
Gary Oldman.
Gary Oldman, thank you. For some reason, every time I think of him, the name Robert pops in my head, and I know that's not right, and I don't know why my brain has attached Robert to him, because he's not a Robert.
Wait, why is Vampire Hunter in there?
It's an anime.
Oh, I was thinking the James Wood, John Carpenter. Isn't that Vampire Hunter?
No, that's
vampires.
Vampires.
Oh, vampires. Okay. Because that's not Dracula. I would have much more fun if we were doing vampires, but I understand why we're not.
So it's not a great movie, but it's a fantastic performance. So the actor who played Dracula in Blackula is actually an amazing actor. He was a very
he's like a Shakespearean.
He was a Shakespearean.
Yeah.
He had played on Broadway and a ton of stuff.
Yeah, he did
very
Lear,
well respected.
Hamlet. Yeah.
Yeah, very well respected actor. It's kind of a bummer that he got typecast in the Blackula and kind of killed his movie career. But he's a great actor, and he should be respected as such.
Didn't he have a really good episode in the original Star Trek as well?
Yes, I believe that is correct. Yes, yeah, no, it's a bummer because he was a great black actor at a time when it was very difficult to be a great black actor and get the kind of roles that a great actor should get. It's kind of a bummer.
You got to have, because I loved the TV version of Salem's Lot on there.
But that's not Dracula.
Not Dracula.
That is Dracula.
No, it's not. That's not Dracula.
I always thought that was Dracula.
Oh.
It's like a Count Orlok. It has all the characteristics of Orlok.
It is a thinly veiled Dracula, but it's not Dracula.
Can we count it? I mean, it's not. I would say it's a thinly veiled Orlok.
Okay.
I would say it's
thinly veiled because King was inspired by Dracula.
Yeah, so you're right. It is a
what would
thinly
happen
veiled Count
if
Orlok.
Dracula came?
Yeah.
Because it was the first Salem's Lot when I was a kid was the first monster Orlok type vampire that I was exposed to.
Yeah.
And I remember being like, this fucking vampire is scary as shit.
I agree. And it had Hutch fighting vampires, which was awesome. I was a big Starsky and Hutch fan.
Bonnie Bedelia too.
And Bonnie Bedelia. Oh yeah, Bonnie Bedelia.
It had Juliette Lewis's dad in it.
Yep.
Who was in all of the Clint Eastwood westerns and Any Which Way But Loose.
If you had to pick Nosferatu, which of the two Nosferatus would you put on the list?
For me, it's well, this is tricky because my initial thought is, of course, the Robert Eggers, because it is so well done across the board.
It's fucking beautiful, yeah.
But the power of the 1922 movie and what it did to horror films and how many movies that it inspired, and also it was a movie without the benefit of itself.
Yeah,
going forward. And also, we talked about in that class, we watched a bunch of silent films in that era, whatever. And a lot of them you watch and like, it's kind of interesting because but they don't work on you. But the 1922 movie still like was scary.
It still works. I mean, you could put them both on there.
Yeah.
They're A and B.
Yeah.
Man, if we were doing vampire movies, which you've probably already done, we could talk about Fright Night. We could talk about Lost Boys. We could talk about...
See, there would be a huge pool on that one.
It'd be a huge list.
It'd be huge.
Because Near Dark, did we ever do Near Dark? If not, we should do that.
I don't think we've done Near Dark. And Wes's favorite vampire movie, Twilight.
Is vampire in Twilight? I never saw Twilight.
I'm sorry. I never saw Twilight.
No, hold on. I didn't mean is vampire in Twilight. I meant is Dracula in Twilight.
No.
That's what I meant to say. Okay.
I've seen you wearing your Edward and Bella shirt, dude. I know you're in. I know you're a fan, super fan.
That's like saying, I've never listened to Backstreet Boys.
Are we just considering the 22 and 24 the end of the list?
Okay. Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. That's a good list.
It's not fair to the patrons because they didn't have Salem's Lot in their pool.
Yeah, not fair to them.
Thank you guys for hanging out to the most worthless podcast that you could possibly tune into.
Please leave mean comments in the comments. Mostly about Wes.
Smash that dislike.
Please, that dislike button.
Please don't leave mean comments.
But ring the bell so you can be disappointed in the future.
Nice. Wow, Joseph's bringing the funny today.
Yeah. Yeah, if you want to hurt us, like us and subscribe. Say goodbye, Ty.
Goodbye, Ty.